All right. Sorry, this is going to be in 2 videos instead of 1. I just screwed up. Okay, where are we at? The burden has shifted to you to prove your speed was reasonable, right? All right, we're recording. Prove that your speed was reasonable. 2 scenarios. Number 1, you're driving down a road, speed limit's 45, you get a ticket for going 55, and everybody else on the road is driving 55. Do you have a defense? Is that a defense that you are driving with the flow of traffic? Flow of traffic. Well, is what most people are doing evidence of what is reasonable? The answer is yes. Now, the law requires an objective test, not a subjective test. Can you go in and say, I'm a really good driver and I was driving at 80 miles an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone and I'm a really good driver and I can do that safely? No. But can you show what a typical reasonable driver is doing, is going over the speed limit? Yes. How could you do that? Well, you could go out and measure a distance on the road and use a timer. Speed is distance divided by time, and show a whole bunch of people are driving over the speed limit. Could you bring in a friend that says, I drive that road every day and everybody goes 55 miles an hour? Yeah, okay. But you can, by presenting evidence that you were driving in the flow of traffic, that your speed was reasonable. Let me give you another example. You're driving out on 89. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. There's no cars on the road. What is that, 65 miles an hour? It is a clear night, the moon is out, you can see for miles, there are no cars around, and you get a ticket for going 78 miles an hour. Can you challenge that? Can you say that under those conditions, with no traffic, with perfect weather conditions, perfect visibility, it is reasonable for me to be driving 78 miles an hour? You know what? Maybe you can make that argument. Okay, so flow of traffic is 1, and road conditions. Can you put on evidence of the road conditions? Can you go out and take a picture of the area and show that it was a nice straight place, that and you know, come in, testify with it, look, there was nobody on the road, it was safe to be driving that fast? The answer is yes, you can do that. Now, one other thing you can do, look at your previous notes where I said the government had to prove speed and over speed limit. Can you attack their evidence on speed? Go back to those notes. Can you attack evidence of speed? Well, number 1, it will be marked on your ticket. Number 2, whenever I get pulled over on a speeding ticket, making sure this is still recording, I ask very politely if I can, how did the police officer measure my speed? And if he said radar, I ask to see his radar reading in his car. If he says no, then don't argue with him. Just remember that and go into court and say, hey, judge, I asked to see the radar reading and he wouldn't show it to me. What if, even with a radar, ask the police officer when he's on the witness stand, what is the accuracy of radar? If he says plus or minus 5 miles an hour and you were going 78 miles an hour, then you get to argue that the evidence only really shows you were going 73 miles an hour. That's all the government can prove. What if he was pacing you? How accurate is pacing? That's where the cop follows behind you and uses his speedometer. Ask him how accurate that is. If he says it's perfectly accurate, get in front of the judge and say, that's ridiculous, judge, you know that's not right. It's at least 10%, and subtract 10% off your speed. If he admits it's plus or minus 10%, and you're going 78, then you're going to do what? Subtract 7.8 from your speed, and basically they can only prove you were going 71 miles an hour. All right, you guys got it? Okay. Now, I'm not telling you to not take traffic school, but there may be times where you can't take traffic school, or there may be a time when you feel that a speeding ticket was unjust. I got a warning for driving on Glassford Hill over here between our school entrance and Maverick for going 11 over. The next day I came here and one of my students had gotten a ticket for going 11 over. I gave him a copy of my warning and said, hey, go to court and show that they're giving a warning for 11 over to a teacher and a ticket for 11 over with a student. All right, it was at the end of the year, so I don't know what happened with that case. But that's not a bad case, is it? All right, so do you guys understand? In summary, and tying this back into separation of powers. Could the Arizona State Legislature have passed a law that said a person shall not drive a vehicle over the speed limit? Could they have done that? And the answer is yes, but they didn't. They said a person shall not drive in a way that is unreasonable, in a way that is not reasonable and prudent. Now, the legislature threw a bone to the cops. What branch of the government are the police officers in? Legislative, executive, or judicial? They are executive. The Arizona State Legislature is the legislative. They make a law saying it's illegal to drive unreasonably. Then they throw the cops and the prosecutor a bone. They're going to say, we're going to make it easy for you to prove unreasonable driving if the person was driving over the speed limit with the prima facie rule. Okay, cop and prosecutor, when you go into court, you don't have to present all this evidence on unreasonable driving. All you have to do to meet your burden of proof and shift the burden to the defendant is to prove that he was going any speed in excess of the speed limit, right? Okay. Now, you have the right to show that your driving was reasonable. Who are you showing that to? You are showing that to the judge who is in the judicial branch who is resolving your dispute. But in resolving your dispute, your ticket, he is interpreting what phrase? What phrase? He's interpreting what is unreasonable. Now, can a police officer give you a ticket for driving 1 mile an hour over the speed limit? Can he? The answer is yes. The cop gets the benefit of the prima facie rule if you were going any speed in excess of the speed limit. But if a police officer went to court with a ticket for driving 1 mile an hour over when there was no special hazards or anything, what would the judge do? Would the judge throw it out? The answer is yes. And not only would the judge throw it out, but the judge would pull that police officer into his hearing room and he would say, look, don't you ever bring a ticket into my courtroom again for driving 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. All right, you guys got it? I'm just making sure this thing's not going to turn off. Okay. Look at where speed limits come from. Is this an example of right, where? Oh. Remember, under C, 702 and 703 says the city and the state, what branch? The executive branch, right? Who designs and orders roadways? The Arizona Department of Transportation, or the Transportation Department within the city government. That's the executive branch. They are given authority by the legislature to set speed limits as long as they follow certain rules. Could the Arizona State Legislature pass a law on the speed limits of every single road in Arizona? Yes, but the law would be like this big, right? And it would be out of date every month when they redesigned or widened or changed roadways or built new roadways. All right? Make sense? So, separation of powers. The Arizona State Legislature makes what illegal? Driving over the speed limit? No. Unreasonable driving is made illegal. Then, the legislature says, executive branch, go set speed limits based upon certain criteria, a civil engineering analysis, and then go enforce those speed limits by giving people tickets. For what? For violating 28-701 by driving unreasonably. By the way, if you get a speeding ticket, look at it and it will have 28-701 unreasonable driving. It won't say driving over the speed limit. Then the legislature says, all right, cop and prosecutor, I'm going to make it easy for you. If somebody was driving over the speed limit, you get the benefit of the prima facie evidence rule, which says all you have to prove to the judge, the judicial branch, is driving over the speed limit. And then the burden shifts to you, driver, defendant, to show reasonable driving. Okay. This is one of, and you can show reasonable driving by talking about flow of traffic, by talking about road conditions. All right? Now, this is one of two ways to fight traffic tickets, speeding tickets. There is a second way. I am not allowed to teach you that. I got in trouble for it. When you graduate, after you graduate, you can walk up to me and say, hey, Giles, what's the second way to fight traffic tickets? And I'll tell you after you graduate. All right, you guys got it? Okay. I'm going to have a little quiz at the end of this lesson for a couple questions. All right. By the way, I think the question's going to be the same one as on your test. All right. Bye.